Hello, and a happy Esports Saturday to you all. Thank you for joining us for the LCS Countdown, where for 30 minutes we highlight some of the LCS's literal POG champs, compare our jungle power rankings, and hear from Alfari on how he tackles defeat until the timer reaches 0 and we jump into Champion Select. I'm James Dash Patterson, joined today by Primal, High, and Mark Z to dig into another day of LCS action. What's going on over there, Mark?
I just love High's look. Like in wardrobe, like in rehearsal, I didn't see that he was going to look like he just came off the slopes, got some fresh powder under his skis. You know,
you like my turtleneck, dude? I just bought it.
Are you a skier or a snowboarder, High?
You know, the only ever experience I had with that, even though I'm from Michigan, which I'm going to be shamed for, is I went ski boarding once when I was 16, and I got kicked off the mountain.
Damn. You got kicked off the mountain? How did you screw it up so badly? Well, probably because you were ski boarding. They're like, sir, that's a snowboard. Stop trying to ski.
I was skiing, right? And I didn't know how to ski, but I got into this like 3-man accident where I also wanted to fall apparently because I was going straight and 2 people were curving into me, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to turn or anything like that. So I smashed into the kid in front of me, and then we tumbled into another person, knocked that person down. So then the ski guards came over and like, hey, you're done here. You don't know how to ski. Get off.
All right,
dude, that's like solo queue but skiing, dude.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you inted into us. Get out of my game. We're 9 times report. Oh my goodness, not how I expected to start our Saturday, but a fun way nonetheless. Before we get too carried away with our own stories and today's stories when it comes to the teams, let's pull up our standings and see how the league is stacked. We've with their victory against Golden Guardians, Cloud9, they're going to stay snug in first place, while 100 Thieves, Dignitas, and TSM tie in second, just 1 win behind them. Evil Geniuses follow up in 5th, and Team Liquid are keeping it even with a 5-5 record to earn themselves 6th place. Now let's focus in on those teams tied for 2nd place, because I'm curious what you all were able to glean from their games just yesterday, starting of course with TSM, who have won 7 of their last 8 games, Primal.
TSM, man. They're looking really good. I think this team has arguably top 1 shot calling. I'll settle for top 2 shot calling in the league mid and late game. Yesterday, we saw a series of really brilliant calls, right? They're doing a weird ring around the rosy, realize they're on the wrong side of the map, decide, okay, we're just going to force a base race. They're escaping from the base race, realize they're going to get collapsed on, decide, okay, we're going to just call a TP, get a nice pick on Jensen, and actually turn this into a situation that's to our advantage. They realize that they're on a comp that really needs to dive Tristana, but Tristana has a lot of support from the Alistair to Disengage and Seraphine to a lesser extent, and they see a heads-up opportunity for Spica to just ult in past the Alistair and make a game-winning play. So TSM, they've looked good in mid and late game shot calling all split, but I think before they were held back by a lot of weak play early game, and now that their early game has started to stabilize, their mid and late game shot calling has really started to shine through, and I think that was what the Sword Art difference was supposed to be, and now we're seeing it really pay dividends.
Well, and as TSM ramps up and has impressed us most recently, Mark, I think the other side of that coin is 100 Thieves, who seem to have taken a bit of a downturn.
Yeah, I think their record still looks good, but when you look at a lot of the actual stats for this team's early game, it's pretty surprising. They're actually the lowest in kills and assists at 15 in the league. Combo that with the fact that they're 2nd highest in deaths at 15. This team is terrible at PvP. Now, their early game is still good on a lot of other metrics by gold difference. They actually generate leads just through the strength of their laning. They have really good objective control, 2nd highest Drake percentage in the league. Like, they still win a lot of games because they're playing from ahead, but they make a ton of mistakes in the early game, despite the synergy that we hyped up coming in from 4 Golden Guardians members. Well, that doesn't seem to be apparent at all in their actual playmaking. When it actually comes to killing people, they have been pretty atrocious at that, and that's why their game time takes forever, because they have the early game leads, but they just are unable to make the plays to close it out.
Speaking about things that don't make sense, I want to talk about Dignitas really quick. Coming into the season, I didn't have him tied for number 2. I don't know if any of you guys in chat did, but if you did, good on you. You're a smarter analyst than me. However, I want to say that they're that high in the rankings because of Dardoch, honestly. To me, the season has been a lot about jungle difference and support difference, and Aphromoo and Dardoch are really good right now, and I hope they continue to be good, but I don't know if that's going to keep going. How long can you have a jungle and support diff game before your AD carry, mid laner, and top laner starts to matter a lot, especially with the jungle nerfs coming in. I wish the jungle nerfs are harder, to be honest, because in my solo queue games, junglers are still taking over the game. But hopefully jungle keeps getting nerfed. But for now, they're looking good, and I think they'll continue to be good for a little while at least.
Agreed high, and I'm a little skeptical still. I mean, we had that discussion with Spawn last week about contender versus pretender, which side is Dignitas on. It's still the case that Dignitas is beating the weaker teams, but losing to most of the stronger teams, with a notable exception being TSM. So I am also interested to see, now that jungle is not as dominant, are they going to be able to contest top teams? Because overall, they've looked a lot better than expectations, but I think they're still a notch below first place contenders.
Yeah, as well, all said and done, a reminder that these three teams are sitting in second place, so they definitely still are some of our top teams in the LCS. We'll see, though, if our games today can shake up those standings, with Team Liquid and FlyQuest starting off our day, searching for their first win of the weekend. C9, of course, taking on EG, and we'll close it out with Golden Guardians versus Immortals. Game 3, though, is certainly a standout, with Dignitas and 100 Thieves battling it out at the top of the standings. For a preview of that matchup, though, we're going to check in with today's casters, Freak and Kobe.
Thank you very much, Dash. Hello and welcome to the caster desks. I've got one, Kobe's got one, I'm pretty sure, and we're going to talk about a really exciting battle that people wouldn't have thought was going to be close coming into this week, but it has been so far. Dignitas have been making a case for themselves as a top-of-the-table contender. They are still tied for second, 10 games in. Of course, standing their way is 100 Thieves, who, also tied for second.
Yes, this is actually a three-way tie for second with TSM, Freak. I bet you wouldn't have expected that as well coming into the split. And
yeah, it would have been TL in this spot, you know?
It's actually been really hype as far as the build-up. I would say, especially for this matchup too, Tony, the coach of 100 Thieves, Zix, yesterday, tweeting out that they had been struggling all week long, kind of referring to some of the scrims. And since they started to get a little bit rocky last week, I'm incredibly excited to see if Dignitas, as the analyst has been talking about and tracking, will finally break in and be one of the sole holders of second place, or start to move up the ladder, because their performance is constantly in doubt, and the only way they're going to move past that is continue to prove it on the Rift.
Yeah, I mean, the first round robin ended up with them only dropping a couple of games, and okay, 8 games to go till spring playoffs, till MSI qualifiers, and I mean, they're going to playoffs almost certainly, and yeah, they might actually make the whole run, so that's going to be exciting. But I got to talk about the fact that, Kobe, you had the chance at stealing this player from me, and you never did when we drafted Fantasy a few weeks back. Soligo is popping off. He is crushing. He was the last pick. I was just gifted him as my mid laner because I knew I was going to sleep on this guy. He's the number 2 overall fantasy points earner. He's absolutely smashing right now. This dude's an absolute PogChamp.
It's funny because I know that you were the last pick in our fantasy draft, and if you had him as your last pick, that means he is literally the last pick of the entire league, of a 10-person league.
Yes.
So even you were sleeping on him, Freak. Everybody was.
That's how drafts go, Kobe.
I am incredibly excited to see him performing well, though. I definitely do also want to share some spotlight with Afromu, though, because this support matchup is the main matchup for me coming into this, 100 Thieves versus Dignitas day. Afromu has been popping off, and it's been for quite a while. He did it last year with Dig 2, 2 different AD carries, newer AD carries. He has been able to raise up into the spotlight, and he's not perfect. Yes, there have been some mistakes, but he does so much to enable his team. Always really good checking in with him. We heard in the interview yesterday as well how much he has been able to contribute for this team. Meanwhile, apart from him, Huhi across the table. This guy, to me, has actually been the best part of 100 Thieves. I'm laying it out there. Huhi has been the biggest reason for the resurgence of this team. Him and FBI have been a dominant lane, and yet he also transitions so well into the team fight phase for his squad. He plays frontline, he goes for engages, he gets a big flanks off for them. I'm incredibly excited for this support matchup because, these are definitely 2 of the best. And with Core JJ having a little bit of a rocky start, anybody could go for that crown, Freak.
That's true. Yeah, might have another MVP season for Afromu. Might have who he's first. It'd be an exciting time to see what happens out of this one. See if anyone can claim the title at the end of the split on top of that one. Now, one champ that has been pivotal, there we go, in the support meta in recent weeks is Rel, who he specifically has been a top performer on her, and we might even see it played in today's matchup. Now, for those of you who are looking to defeat, nay, trample your opponents in solo queue, here's Azale with some tips and tricks for the Iron Maiden.
Rel galloped her way into the professional scene this year and has quickly trampled the competition to become the top support pick. Saddle up, partners, because it's time to learn about Rel. Oh, what's that? One more pun and I'm fired? Okay, time to stop horsing around. Let's start with a couple basics. While you can't use W or E flash, you can use both Q flash and R flash, which can be situationally very useful to finish off a kill or find a surprise initiation. Your E stun also has a lot longer range than you may think. Generally, if someone's in auto attack range, you can stun them. Don't feel that you have to get behind or even on top of your opponents to land a stun. Rel is all about layering CC, which is why she has the ability to use both her E and her R during the W animation. This allows you to CC people while waiting on the delayed W knockup to land, making Rel engages incredibly difficult to react to when executed properly. It also means that you need to properly spread out your abilities to maximize the CC duration. If you don't have your ultimate available, you can W into an immediate E stun while in the air to lock up your opponents in place for the incoming W knockup. Or, if you do have all your cooldowns, you can pull off the engages you've seen in the LCS time and time again by using Flash, and then immediately casting your W and ultimate. Magnet Storm will snap them together for the W to land, and then you cast a delayed E to maximize the CC duration. While the mounted engages are the most flashy and the best for most teamfight situations, I do feel that the dismounted engages are extremely underutilized, especially pre-6. And, if they're well executed, they are nearly impossible to react to. When mounting, you gain a large boost of movement speed towards opponents, and then fling them over your shoulder with your first auto attack, putting them in the perfect spot for a follow-up stun. Simply start out dismounted, then, when your opponent steps a little bit too far forward, W to mount, Flash auto to flip them in, then Q immediately to space out your CC, followed up by that E to then layer the stun perfectly with the knockup. By adding the Q into the combo, there's no need to time out your crowd control, as the combo layers naturally with hardly any overlap. This is deadly for all-ins. Well, that'll do it for my quick Rel breakdown. Be sure to let me know what champion you'd love to see next at RiotZale on Twitter.
I'm the happiest girl in the world.
I feel like I got to go play some Rel now, my friends. I've never played the champion, but that was probably one of the best breakdowns I've ever seen on how to play a champion mechanically. But now that we are past the halfway point of spring, it's time to start the conversation around who could be our next Honda MVP. And a factor of that process is the Player of the Game awards from each game. Friend of the LCS and absolute perfect human being, CoreJJ tweeted the other day, and he was wondering if we award Player of the Game here in NA. Well, CoreJJ, we sure do. And here is the current leaderboard for just that. Taking a look at the top 10, though, I do want to quickly acknowledge that there are 21 more people beyond this list who have picked up at least one player of the game. Half the league has at least done it once. Hi, does anything in looking at this list jump out to you immediately?
You know, it's really weird to me when I look at the list because we see 10 players here, right? And you look for a role, but you don't see a support here. And this entire split, we've talked about like how good CoreJJ is, Huhi, Vulcan, and all these supports that could be contenders for like the best in the league, but not a single support shows up in the top 10. So then that brings me to the question is, are we messing up Player of the Games, or are people just not giving supports the credit that they deserve? What's going on?
Yeah, and it's pretty funny that CoreJJ was the one who asked the question, and he's just not on the leaderboard at all. But I think to your question, Hi, I think it's, I forget which option was first, but whichever option was the supports are not just doing that well, I think it's that answer, because Core, honestly, he looked like, you know, he's like more like a demigod, not a god right now. Whereas, you know, some other players like Centaur and Alfari, as you can see from their pogs, have looked really good. But I expect him to get online in the second half of the split.
I was going to say, Cora, a previous MVP, we do know that he has what it takes to make that push. However, only a back half of the entire split to get it done. We'll be taking a closer look at Blabber a little later on, so we're going to ignore him sitting there at the top of the standings just for now. Let's talk about a few of the other top performers on that list, starting with you, Mark.
Gonna give some attention to PoE, the guy he's tied with right now. I think that might be a surprise to some people that PoE's at 4, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense when you look at TSM's winning streak and how it has come about. A lot of it has been centered around adapting to PoE. When you look at all these components and their different playstyles and who was going to change, PoE is not the one that changed. They changed to him, where he plays incredible control mages. He's super good in mid to late game, but he doesn't do a ton of proactive playmaking and roaming in the early game, and that's fine because he's such an engine for this team in the mid to late game. The entire reason they were able to win that game yesterday was because he stalled out TL in the mid game with some nice pickoffs onto Tactical. Yes, that was partially Tactical's fault, but I think PoE has been kind of the staple player on this team who is always in an even or winning position for the team, and then he does make a lot of their biggest plays to win the game in the mid to late game.
Yeah, one Pog vote separating him as well as Blabber from the rest of the pack. Let's jump to Impact now, Primal.
Yeah, let's jump to Impact. And what can I say about Impact that hasn't been said already? This guy is an absolute monster. He's really, really good in lane with the top 3 CSD at 15. And he's been a carry for EG, right? We saw him dominate on Renekton, and then other teams were like, okay, we're never giving that guy Renekton again, until last game where he reminded everyone of why he gets Renekton. So Impact has been super good on both defensive champions and offensive champions. Yes, he's not quite the carry player that people want him to be, not looking for counter picks like Jackson to Camille, etc. But at this point, let's just give the guy a break. He knows his style, and he's super good at it.
He is impressed. That Gnar game is going to live in my brain rent-free for a number of years at least, getting absolutely focused and then the comeback to win it all. Hi, what about you? Where are you looking?
I'm taking a look at mid lane. Personally, I'm looking at Perks. He was one of the hypest people to come into the league, for me at least, and at first he didn't really show up to speed, but he's been picking up a lot recently. He has the most solo kills pre-15, he does the most damage for his gold, and his KDA is actually really good despite not being a KDA player. So with all those things in mind, I think his lane phase is strong, and the most important thing to me is that it seems like he's not trying 110% yet. Of course he's like trying to win the games, but I don't feel like he's like, this is like Worlds moment, I need to do my best every single game. He's kind of playing for fun at times, and I'll use that liberally. Hopefully, I think he's probably better than what he's shown so far, and I know that's a weird statement to say, but I expect more from him. Not that he's doing bad, but I expect him to be even better and better as time goes on.
Hi, we don't call that playing for fun. We call it sandbagging, bro. It's sandbagging.
Hey, man, I'm being polite to these players. I like to play for fun often, so I can respect it.
Well, a quick update about halfway through the split on who leads those player of the game leaderboards, feeding into the Honda MVP at the end of the split. We are going to step away on the other side of the break. We've got a rumble in the jungle with the analysts defending their LCS jungle power rankings. We'll see you here after the break. Welcome back to LCS Countdown with patch 11.14. Oh my goodness, we're not going back to Season 1. Bringing plenty of changes to the jungle. I asked my analysts to power rank the junglers of the LCS to see who reigns supreme in their role. But first, I want to know what are some of the metrics that you all were considering while making these lists. Hi, let's start with you, as you have actually played jungle on the pro stage.
As someone that has played very high-pressure champions like Amumu and Shivani, you know, I think I'm qualified to say that one of the metrics that you're looking for junglers is their early game pressure. Junglers dictate the pace of the game, whether they're ganking or whether they're farming. They get to choose. Kind of, they've been doing both recently. But at the end of the day, you have to look at how good they're controlling the early game. Then you have to look at the champion pool. Can they play tanks? Can they play carries? Can they be supportive, engagers, etc.? So you have to put all these into mind, and even with that, when you guys take a look at this power ranking, if you don't like them, please flame the Mark Z on Twitter instead of any of us. So take your complaints to him. He'll put it into the bin.
Hey, that's clicks. That's engagement, Mark.
Yeah, you know what?
High for that right there.
You're right, High. Everyone, I'll tank the flame for the engagement. I do want to make a note that this is for spring split only. We're not including lock-in tournament. And at least for me personally, I'm definitely more focused on the performance aspect of what they've shown on the LCS games, not like my opinion on their top tier ceiling of skill or something like that.
Yeah, to add on to the disclaimers, so this is taking into account all the games in the spring split so far, not just the recent ones. So some people might be like, but this player's popping off lately. Yeah, but we got to look at the entire split, not just the last week. And in addition to that, I also look at what I think the player's role on the team is supposed to be. Some of these junglers are like the star of their team, and they're supposed to be the carry. Some of them are supposed to take a more supportive role, so we have to factor that in. But it's jungle, man. It's so hard to separate the performance of the individual.
All right. right. Now that we've properly disclaimed this jungle tier list, let's get it up onto the screen and see where each of you are ranking the junglers here in the league. First time anyone here on the desk is seeing these lists, so excuse us while we react. Blabber unanimously #1 across the board. I do see a difference there in rank #2. Actually, all throughout, you guys, maybe we can look at some ideal groupings and things, but some significant differences for sure.
Damn, Mark, closer at 8?
I knew I was going to have to come to defend closer. We'll get there at some point. I do want to say 1 and 9 and 10 feel pretty unanimous, I think, for most people. And everything in the middle is a giant throw a dart at a wall. Like, it really depends on how you're going to argue it. I think it's all over the place. So I'm excited to dig into it.
Yeah, let's start. Let's start with the easy one, though. And Hi, maybe I'll let you kick off on it so you can as well say whatever point you were about to. Blabber, unanimously #1. Let's talk about him.
Right, I mean, there's no doubt that Blabber's #1. You take a look at any of his stats, he's pretty much leading the board on all of them, whether it be KD, damage, gold, etc. He's pretty much, like, right there. It's first on all of them, actually. So, it's a jungler-based meta and the #1 team that's crushing people with the #1 stats. It's hard not to argue that he's not first. And I was going to say, I really like Marks' tier list because it looks very similar to mine. So, I think me and Marks are pretty smart here. Primal, I don't know about you there, buddy, but you're looking a little bit different from us.
They look a little different. Okay, what do you want to talk about first? Do we want to talk about closer? Because I don't understand putting closer top 3.
We'll get to him. He's slated last on our list because he is the most contentious, it seems, between the lists. So let's jump to Svenskeren. Now, this was placed, 2-3 for some of your lists, but Primal, why don't you take a crack here?
Yeah, so the thing with Svenskeren is he's kind of like the Jizuke of the jungle in a sense that he does have these pop-off games because he's an aggressive player who, he's mechanically gifted and sometimes the pop-offs work. But when I look at a jungler and what I want them to do, particularly in a team like EG that has a carry indefinitely, has a carry in Jizuke, I want them to be more consistent. And I see Svenskeren make a lot of mistakes due to over-aggression. Just yesterday, we saw him all in Jose Diodo in the jungle. He burns his own flash. Jose Diodo doesn't burn his flash at all. Jose Diodo comes back. Is a 3-0 Graze all of a sudden. We saw in the game versus TL, he got an early lead going for the team, but he kind of threw that by trying to engage on Core JJ, who was playing Galio. So with Svenskeren, I think he's a good player, but he's not consistent enough for me to want to rate him higher.
All right, so #5 on Primals.
Yeah, he has him lower. High and I have him more like 2-3. And I think he's a really, really good playmaker in the early game, and he has to sacrifice some what would be better pathing to play around his more erratic playmaking of his teammates. Like, if you're playing with Jizuke, you have to be mid when Jizuke is going for a play, and sometimes that's not going to be optimal jungle pathing. And so I think he's a great team player and being where he needs to be for his team while still helping get them early game leads.
From Svenskeren, let's hop to Spica, because I don't think I realized this the first time I took a look at this, but Mark, you've got him all the way down at 7, but he's also as high as 2 when it comes to some of the other lists.
If there's one ranking that I am not confident in on my own list, it's probably the Spica ranking. I think he's actually playing really well, and that's why I was kind of putting that preface at the top that, like,
right,
I don't
so
think
7 naturally.
Yeah, I don't think being that low is an indication of necessarily his performance. I think he's really good, and he has some of the best objective control in the league. He's really good about coordinating with Sword Art, but he doesn't generate natural advantages for himself. Like, he's often not that far ahead, and I think a lot of the times that it's Sword Art feeling like he's leading a lot of the plays, and Spica is often more on follow-up duty, and that's why I have him a little bit lower.
Okay, so I think Spica is quite good, and I think he was the most consistent member on TSM, even when TSM was a dumpster fire. Now that they're not a dumpster fire, he's having his time to shine. We saw him get a really clutch Baron steal yesterday. He has a 7 KDA at before 15, so I agree with Mark that he doesn't create a lot of advantages, but he doesn't cede a lot of advantages either, and he doesn't make many mistakes. And for a team like TSM that's focused on getting to mid and late game and not making a lot of big plays early, I think Spica does his job perfectly. So this might just be a criteria difference, but I think for what TSM is looking for from Spica, he's doing an amazing job.
Hi.
I definitely think Spica is strong, but I wouldn't put him at #2 like you do on your list. He literally built Divine Sunder on Lilia one game. I believe it was Lilia that he built it on. And whether he's just doing it for fun or not, he's been doing a lot of weird builds on champions. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with him being #2. Like, I put him at #5, and I think it's arguable whether he's like 5, 4, or like even potentially 3. But two's definitely pushing for me. I think he's too high on your list there.
Okay. Okay, now we're going to get to the one that y'all called out right at the top of the block here, Closer. And Mark, granted, you have him in 8, and you said you were prepped to defend this. You knew you'd have to. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's hear the defense.
All right, Closer obviously is not an 8th place jungler in the league. Like I said, this is performance-based through spring split only. The lock-in tournament would have him way higher, but when you look at his actual stats, he's pretty close to the bottom of the barrel in a lot of the individual playmaking ones. He's the lowest in kills and assists at 15. Or second lowest, I think. I think Iconic might be the only one lower. But he doesn't get a lot of ganks done in the early game. His first blood percent's pretty low. His actual playmaking is not that high. He was leading the league in deaths as junglers as of yesterday. I think that might have changed, but he doesn't have the kills and assists to back it up. So, like, if you're really aggressive and making plays and you die a lot, I don't care. Svenskeren dies a lot, but he's often also getting a lot of kills and assists. Not the case with Closer right now either. And the one stat that he leads in is XP differential at 10. And you go, okay, well, he's got great pathing. And I agree with that. But you have to look at his mid laner. Damonte is the lowest XP differential at 10 in the league right now for mid laners. That is where most of that lead is actually coming from, is the mid waves that Closer collects to get priority to go move around the map with his mid laner. And so I think he's a really good player, but they have not made many plays on his own. I can't think of that many ganks that he turns. They try a lot of dives, but there's not that many ganks, and he has a lot of jungle control. He has a lot of objectives under his belt. But in terms of getting them leads, when I was talking about 100 Thieves, horrible early game PvP stats, part of that comes from Closer not being able to make kills happen for his team.
Primal, you got him as high as 4th.
I do, and here's a situation where the stats don't lie, but I think they mislead. Mark, you yourself noted that 100 Thieves as a team is really, really bad in PvP early, which is kind of weird when we think of them as like being a team that dives side lanes. And I think his stats, Closer stats, are a reflection of that, but I don't think he's causing those stats. I think it's just a lot of lack of coordination across the team, and instead what I want to focus on is his objective control. 100 Thieves has the second highest first dragon percentage in the league and overall dragon percentage in the league. So I think Closer, what he's been doing is focusing on objectives rather than making plays on the side lanes for his team. And that's why this team is 7-3 right now, because they're consistently able to get objective leads with snowballing early.
Well, I feel like we could talk for another hour on these jungle power rankings, but we have to get to the first game of the day. And all this jungle talk has me ready to jump into that first matchup, because we're going to see Jose Diodo face off once again against Santorin. And so, Primal, let's talk about Jose Diodo, because we haven't yet in the context of that tier list and how he might match up today against Santorin.
Dude, for the hungry, he is bred, and for FlyQuest, he's a carry. This guy is really, really sound mechanically, and I think it's been getting overlooked a little bit because FlyQuest has not been doing super well, but we saw him have a huge pop-off performance on Graves yesterday. We've seen him be mechanically proficient on Hecarim in past games, getting out of situations where he should die and making sure in situations where he should get the kill, he absolutely does so. So I think for a jungler who's new to this league and on a team where he is pressured to be the carry, Jose Diodo's looked quite good overall, and I'm really looking forward to seeing his development as a carry player.
I think it'll be particularly interesting to see how he can affect the map, given the way that Team Liquid has kind of honed in on a style high, more specifically playing around bot lane than maybe they ever have before.
Right. If I have Core JJ on my team, I will probably go bot lane. I will probably gank for his lane and be like, hey, let's get you ahead. Now you tell me what to do. I'm pretty sure he's the main shot caller on the team. And it's so much easier to play the game from ahead than it is behind. And when your shot caller is smart and good, it makes it so much easier to just play around him, right? So put your advantage into him, get him ahead, and then let him dictate how the game goes later on. And we've seen where they haven't tried that, where they try to get Alfari ahead instead. And the games just didn't look as clean. They did very weird things where they went for kills more so than objectives. And anytime a team does that, that's how you know that their macro and gameplay is bad now, when you're only focusing kills and not objectives.
Yeah, and they should have a pretty good matchup versus the FlyQuest bot lane. The one thing with Tactical right now is, and he's been vocal about it in the Team Liquid documentary series, about how he's struggling a little bit with burnout and some of that kind of phase, and I think that's manifesting on the Rift a little bit. But we've all seen his peaks at Worlds, at Summer last year, and so I'm hoping he can get out of what is very clearly a bit of a slump right now, because he is such an important part. If all the resources are going down there and getting him ahead, he needs to be responsible with that gold.
Yeah, we have seen him absolutely pop off, waiting for him to return to form. More comment than anything. It's interesting to me, Hai, that you would point to the support as the reason to go to the bot lane as opposed to the AD carry, but that speaks to the power of player that Core JJ is. Either way, the teams are just about ready to dive into Champion Select, so it's time for us to hand it over to Freak and Kobe for the call.